link this with. Hello and welcome to the GhostÉire Channel. My name's Anthony Kerrigan, and tonight we're joined by poet, blogger, author, and witch Morrigan Daimler. How you doing, Morrigan? Oops, sorry, no, I just sorry, no. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
I thought I unmuted you there. No, so sorry there. You know.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So Morgan's we're talking to Morgan. She's in Connecticut there, and I'm from Killarney in County Kerry, south of Ireland there. And we're going to be talking about the Morrigan, also Norse mythology, and to top it off, then we're going to be talking about fairies. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them on this post, on this live show. If you want to contact us, you can go to our website, www.ghostére.net, go to the contact page, fill in the blanks. If you have any private message, just put in brackets private message. If you're affiliated with any paranormal team or tourist attraction, feel free to name the group or the organization, and we'll give a shout out to you as well. We'll also come in live through the GhostÉire channel, the red button on our website. You can come away from Facebook if you want, go to our website, go to www.ghostére.net, go and press the red button, the GhostÉire channel, and you can watch live via that page. You can also see what's coming up in the future and past shows there. We'll also have a competition later on folks. I will give you a word. Be the first person to type the word and have a chance to enter the Halloween mega draw, along with Morgan, who has an opportunity to win loads of prizes coming towards Halloween there. Just a few shout outs. Hi, Sean. How you doing? How are you keeping, Sean? I hope you're keeping well this wonderful Sunday evening, afternoon as well in Connecticut. Hope you're keeping well, Sean. Mary from Back in Time Paranormal Investigators. Hi, Mary. How you doing, sis? She says, hi, guys. Hope you're keeping well there. We'll be touching base with you soon there. Brian says, hi, guys, from Belfast Paranormal Investigators. Hi, Brian. How are you keeping well? Sean says, I'm great. Thank you. Great to see. Good to see you both. Thank you there, Sean. So, yes, the first topic we're going to be talking about is the Morrigan there, Morgan. And I was looking for people to talk about this kind of subject there, and you popped up there, and because you're a famous author and writer there and blogger. Can you tell us what is the Morrigan, or who is it, or what is it?
Sure. Yeah. Who would probably be the better way to phrase it? So the Morrigan is actually one of the more well-known of the goddesses. She is one of the Tuatha Danann, sort of the old gods of Ireland. And she is particularly associated with like war and prophecy and things related to that. Other things as well, as I'm sure many people already know, the Irish gods don't work the way like the classical Greek and Roman gods are. There aren't really like the god of this particular thing. There's just different ones that we tend to associate more with certain things, but there's a lot of overlap. So her name, Morrigan, in Irish, modern Irish and older Irish, means either great queen or phantom queen. Right. It's kind of one of those things where, we know for sure what the Regan part means, but the more is a little vague in the original material. So either the Great Queen or the Queen of Phantoms, Queen of Specters. So she's got kind of all of that association with her.
Yeah, I was looking at your name then as well. It's not that difference in comparison. The way your name is Morgan, and you just mentioned it there more.
Yep, I actually have a lot of people who ask me if I picked the name on purpose, like if it's a fake name that I use because I write a lot about the Morrigan, but it's not. It's a Welsh boy's name, as I'm sure many people know, but it's also a breed of horse here in the United States. And my mother just really liked the horses. So that is the very sad backstory for how I got my name.
Oh, so
nothing to do with the Irish goddess.
Nothing to do with that. Paul says, hello, friends. Hi, Paul, as well from Belfast. How you doing? Jenny's about to do a live show. Jenny from Emerald Isle Paranormal Research. We'll check in again with you, Jenny. I'll watch you later on as well. And good luck tonight there. I'll have a great interview there. Talk to you later there, sis. Kelly Grace Radcliffe says, hello. Hi, Kelly. Hope you're keeping well. Can you tell us there, Morgan? So, the Morrigan has who has she appeared to, and what type of relationships has she had with those people that she's appeared to?
Sure. So the Morrigan we actually have written material about her that goes back quite a long ways. So of course she'd be going back into like the mythology and the really old stories. But there actually are accounts from historic battles. So this isn't like mythology per se, but historic battles where it's said that the Morrigan would appear. There's one particular one, I'm trying to remember exactly which story it's from. I believe it was the Cathma Wrath, where it was said that the Morrigan appeared and was leaping from shield rim to sword tip over the army, which I imagine was both inspiring for the people who she was supporting and really terrifying for the other people she was fighting against.
True, yeah.
So we do, my point being, like, we do have these historic accounts of her appearing to people. And then, of course, in more modern times, there are people who still engage with her in various ways, particularly in Ireland, of course, and do see her have had encounters with her.
Okay.
Even in the historic material, I do want to say, because she does have this reputation being connected to war and battle and sort of all of that. Some people consider her to be sort of frightening and scary, but we have historic accounts of people who would pray to her, particularly for like success with things they were doing, cattle raids in particular. So she definitely has her positive side, and people that were connected to her in that aspect.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. So, like, if it's been in written text before, then I suppose it has to be, obviously, if she's still around, if she's immortal there, like, has she appeared in recent times? As in, documented, as in, like, I know you see in the newspapers there that people see a hooded monk, all these ghosts of hooded monks. Well, is there any suggestion that the Morrigan's been seen?
Yeah, there's definitely many people who've had accounts or told stories of seeing her or encountering her. Sometimes in less tangible ways, like dreams, but sometimes in more direct ways. Obviously, she does have particular places associated with her in Ireland, and people go there sometimes and sort of seek that energy out, and they do have experiences with her for sure. Yeah.
And I suppose that, we've talked about, I suppose people know about Queen Maeve and the Banshee there, but how does the Morrigan compare to the Banshee and the Morrigan? Sorry, how does the Morrigan compare to Queen Maeve and the Banshee? Sorry.
Sure. So Queen Maeve is a really interesting one, because what we have of her, of course, is mostly from the Ulster cycle, and she's sort of presented there as a pseudo-historical queen, but there's a lot of evidence that she may originally have been a goddess. So she would have had some similar interests to the Morrigan. You know, the Morrigan, of course, being connected to battle and sovereignty and success, and Maeve has very similar kind of things that go along with her. Maeve just sort of ended up being passed down, her stories being passed down with her in this sort of human guise or lens, whereas the Morrigan did not get that treatment. You know, a lot of the older Irish goddesses, they were either turned into saints like Brigid, or fairy queens like Anya.
Yeah.
And the Morrigan kind of did not get any of that sort of treatment. She very much kind of stayed the way she was. And if anything, the kind of, as the centuries went on and we get closer to like today, she was more and more perceived as sort of this dangerous, dark figure in the night. And the connection with the Banshee is actually particularly interesting, at least from my perspective. And this is, I can get very like nerded out on linguistics and folklore and stuff. There's a lot of people who speculate that the Morrigan herself, or one of her sisters, Bive, who's also sometimes called the Morrigan, which is very confusing, but you just kind of have to embrace the confusion, that they may have been sort of the predecessor or the original idea for the Banshee. That we see them in folklore and in some of these myths and stories, like washing the bloody armor of people who are about to die. So the person would see them as this sort of omen. And then, of course, we get into the idea of the Banshee, literally just means fairy woman, but as this sort of omen that would appear before a death in a family to keen, to mourn, to let the family know that someone was going to die. So it's that very strong connection. And we don't have stories of the Banshee that go back as far as we have stories of the Morrigan and Bive as these sort of in this role as these death omens. So there's been a lot of speculation that that might be sort of the source of where that originated, where that came from.
Yeah, it's interesting, like, you know, as you mentioned, because I suppose it's in ancient texts like the Ulster cycle as well, and you know, we'll go back to landmarks later on this topic there, on a Gat. But like, I suppose, is it the Christian religion that really killed that, you know, that kind of link to Queen Maeve? Like, I know she's supposed to be married to, and Morrigan married to the land, and if you were a chieftain, would you get married to the Morrigan and be one with the land? Was that the old ritual? Was it same as Queen Maeve?
We don't have evidence of that with Morrigan per se, although her husband in the mythology, the Dagda, was one of the kings of the Tuatha De Danann, so we do have that sort of link there. Maeve, it's much stronger. She went through husbands, and her husbands were always kings. So with her, it's a little more clear that there was that sovereignty goddess thing going on. With the Morrigan, it seems to be less that the king would marry her the way a traditional sovereignty goddess would have been treated, and more that she would be the one who sort of would help choose the king or inspire the king to success in battle in order to become the king. So sort of the difference between like a peaceful transfer of power and a not peaceful.
Yeah.
She would be on that other end of things.
Okay. Just a few more shout outs. Mary Kate Barry. How you doing, Mary Kate? Look, hope you're loving County Kerry at the moment, Mary. I know you're around here somewhere. You're in County Kerry there. Therese O'Carr. Hi, Therese. How you doing? How you keeping? So if you have any more questions, feel free to put them through to Morgan. I'm just going to ask you there, like, so, you know, she's been renowned to shapeshift, Morgan there, you know, and it's to do with nature. But is there any specific reason why she turns into a crow or a wolf, or I think in some cases it's a goat as well, or other animals.
Yep, the crow and the raven are her main forms. Like those are the ones we see referenced kind of all over the place. And definitely with those, it's because of the connection to battle, because they were obviously birds that would be attracted to the aftermath of battle. The wolf is another one we do see, and that probably because wolf, the term in Irish, modern Irish and older Irish, as far as I'm aware, was also a term for warriors. So, you know, a warrior would be referred to that way. So I suspect that that's possibly where some of that comes in. She also, in some of the stories, takes the form of an eel and a red-eared heifer. The eel, I think we'd really get into a lot of speculation to try to figure out why that particular form. The heifer, I would, say is because cows are very valuable. It was sort of money on the hoof back in the day. So it's kind of taking on that form, symbolizing that. She is very, very connected to cattle raids and to that entire concept. And, even within her human form, she has shape-shifting. So we don't just see one description of her. We see her, in one case described as a red-haired woman, and that seems to be the closest to what she might actually look like. That's in the Tonbo Ragamna. Cuchulainn kind of catches her by surprise a bit, and that's what she looks like. But we have other stories where she appears as like a beautiful young woman. The one I was mentioning with the Cath Mairah, when she's hopping from shield to spear point to sword point, she's described as a naked hag. So she definitely can kind of look however she wants to look.
Yeah.
I think got a lot of variety.
So that's how I must find out. On mornings I wake up, I change with the change with the day, or through the day I change. Yeah, I won't be sprightly. I'll be like a slug in the evening, so slow. If I'm lucky, like drooling. So I'm only joking there. Before I go to the last question, Sean has asked the question there. If we can ask questions, I would love to ask Morgan about Niman, and if there is any evidence that she is an aspect of the Morrigan rather than Anu.
Sure. So Nevin, of course, gets referenced a lot in connection to the Morrigan. It seems like, and this I'm going to try to say this as briefly as I can because this is such a complicated subject. We have references in the Leverkwal Aaron that the Morrigan's first name might possibly be Anu. It's referenced in one section. It's kind of contradicted somewhere else. The Leverkwal Aaron is sort of a mishmash of a lot of different regional beliefs. So it can be very contradictory. Nevin is most often associated with Bive, and it seems to have been more of a figure, particularly in like the northwest part of Ireland, whereas then you have Macha in the northeast and the Morrigan sort of more in the central and southern areas, historically speaking. And what we find is that Nevin is often associated with the Morrigan and connected to her and connected to Bive. She appears with them. She's a little more intense than they are in the stories. There's one description in the Cattle Raid of Cooley where she is screaming and shrieking, and the army below her is such a they start impaling each other, because they just completely lose it in her presence. So right. She's definitely an intense one. And then a book came out in the 1880s that described her as one of the Morrigan. So she's kind of been understood that way as one of the Morrigan since then. And something I should have said earlier, in case this is confusing anyone, the Morrigan is a name for a particular goddess. We do know that. We have a lot of evidence of that. It's also a title. So we do see it applied to other goddesses as well, which I think is kind of where this question is coming in to a degree. Is it possible that Evan is the actual name of the Morrigan? I don't think we'd ever know for sure because we just don't have enough evidence, unless there's a text out there that hasn't been translated yet that gets into it. I hope that answers the question.
I suppose it's like Queen Maeve is like it's not just one person. It could have been a title to somebody who was representing a woman that the chieftain married the land, you know, something like that. You know, it's like a title instead of actually name.
Yeah, there's been a lot of speculation with Maeve that it possibly was a title, perhaps even for someone who's acting like as a priestess for that goddess. And my friend Laura O'Brien has written a book about Maeve where she gets into this more than I could get into it, but talks about the idea that perhaps Maeve was used as kind of a title that would get passed on, which is why we have all of these different stories attributed to this one figure. It's also possible that Maeve is a goddess herself. There's often so many layers and nuances to all of these stories. It's fascinating stuff.
And just probably one of the last questions I suppose touched on the Morrigan there is there any before we go on to, I know you got a question there, Sean, there is there any landmarks associated in Ireland with the Morrigan and abroad?
Sure. There are definitely landmarks in Ireland, of course. There are a few possibly in Scotland, and that has to do with the Dalriada settling, and you know, we do see some of the Tuatha Dé Danann, that belief kind of showing up in Scotland as well. But Ireland for sure, not just with the Morrigan specifically, it often has to do with the Morrigan and the Dagda together. So like there's a site by Shean Newgrange, that is supposed to be the bed of the couple, is what they call it, where the Dagda and the Morrigan did what you would expect people to do in a bed, I assume, if they're a married couple. A lot of the mythology, by the way, is very blunt about things like that.
Okay.
So if you decide to go read source material, just be prepared.
That's good.
And then there's a place, yeah, in Sligo near you know, if you read the Cathmoy Tura, the full version, there is some really interesting stuff in there, definitely. There's a place in Sligo near Heapstown Cairn that's also associated with the Morrigan and the Dagda coming together, we will say. And then, of course, Onagat in Roscommon, Tulsk, the Cave of Cats, which is just a really fascinating place in general. There's so much there, mythology and folklore and all of that. But the Cave of Cats, Onagat, is referred to as the Morrigan's fit abode in one of the Dinhenches, and it's kind of thought to be like her main location, her main place that she comes and goes from.
Yes, I've been down there a few times there, and it's so magical in there. Took some pedometers down there one for one investigation, and it read that we did about 6,000 steps, something like that, 6,000 steps, 6,000 meters, 6 kilometers. You know yourself there, it's only about a few hundred, if that 100 feet long, you know, the cave itself there, you know.
Yeah.
And it has been known for people to go in there and end up somewhere else there, and it's called the other world, the gateway to the other world there. But it was an amazing place.
The Shiv Cruachan. It really is. It's an intense place to go into for people who haven't been there. It looks like a very unassuming place when you see the entrance, and then you go down and down and down, and once you actually get into the cave and everything opens up, it really is just an amazing experience. For sure.
Sean just says it does answer my question. Thank you so much, Morgan. Always Sean.
Excellent.
So it's competition time there. So we're going to give you a chance to enter our Halloween mega draw. But first of all, you have to be the first one to type this word down. And since we're talking about the Morrigan, I want you to type I want you to be the first to type this word. And the word is crow. CROW. It's not that hard. So it's crow. Be the first one to type the word crow. Let's see if you can come in there. Anybody with the chance to go into the Halloween mega draw, get your fingers on the typing. Let me see. This is where Mary's coming there. Mary from back in time. Mary got in there first. So Mary, you were quick. You know what's coming in. Brian was close there. We keep you on there, Brian, as well. Perfect there. So Vivian Crowley.
It's got crow in it.
Is that a person? I don't know. Who's that there? Do you know that?
Yeah. The person. Yeah.
I have mine tagged somewhere else. All right, no worries there. Oh, you're tagging someone. All right. It's weird. That's weird. That, you tag somebody, the names come up. Okay. So the next question, the next topic, so we're going to talk about is Norse mythology there. So we're going to be talking about Thor and all things like that. So first of all, there, Morgan, can you tell us what is the background behind Norse mythology there?
In general, or connected to Ireland, because there's a lot going on there.
I suppose we're connected to what is it there, and I'll probably come in with what we know. Why is it with Ireland there with its connections? What is it there? How old is it?
Sure. So, Norse mythology, you're looking at sort of the pagan beliefs of the various Norse cultures that would be all across Scandinavia and into Germany, Iceland. Is a good modern example because they still preserve a lot of the culture. So it's belief in gods. They're called the Aesir, and then the Vanir are sort of this other group of connected gods. Iceland is a particularly interesting place to look at because there was a lot of crossover between the Norse beliefs and the Irish beliefs. Because a lot of women who settled Iceland did so involuntarily after the Norse kind of swung by Ireland first.
Right.
And then the women ended up in Iceland. So we actually can kind of trace like a lot of Irish beliefs that ended up there as well, and then kind of were syncretized with the Norse. And of course, then there was a Norse presence, Viking presence in Ireland, particularly around Dublin. I'm sure most people are aware of how Dublin got its name and that it was settled the way that it was. There actually used to be a sacred grove to Thor, who's one of the Norse gods, right around Dublin. So there's a lot of that going on. Yeah. And a lot of cultural crossover.
And like, there's a situation, the nine worlds. This is something in Norse mythology, and it's linked to the tree. Now, I don't know how you pronounce it. Is it Yggdrasil? Yggdrasil?
Yggdrasil.
Yggdrasil. Oh, God, I was not that bad there. Yeah, no. But what are the nine worlds? What's that about there in Norse?
So the way that the Norse believe, the pagan Norse believe that the universe was created and exists, is that there's different worlds. So we have our world, Midgard, that's what it's called, but the human world. And then you have the world of the gods, the Asgard, which would be, where the Aesir live. Vanaheim is where the Vanir live. That's that other group of kind of connected gods. You also have a world where the human dead go. It confuses a lot of people because it's got hell in the name, but it's not like the Christian hell. It's just a place where when humans die, they go there and they're with their family, and there's a big hall, and it's not a place. It's just
it's interesting
a place.
The kind of comparisons, like as in it's mistreated by
and then you
religion.
The world where the elves live. Yeah, there's a lot of speculation, I think, that the Christian word hell is probably taken from the Norse, but the concepts are very different, just very different. Like, there's some material in the Norse where you'll see people talking about they didn't want to go to Helheim, but it's because they wanted to go to like one of the halls of one of the gods in Asgard, like Odin, Valhalla. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Valhalla, thanks to Marvel comics in particular, and movies. Yeah. But Valhalla was sort of this place that warriors who died a brave death were thought to go. So of course, a lot of the material we have, kind of the same with like the Ulster cycle with the Irish. It was sort of like the epic stories that people were being told. So they're exciting, they're adventure stories, they're about warriors, and those are the sort of people who they want to go to, the warrior afterlife, not the everybody's grandma goes there afterlife, effectively. Yeah, but hell in general was not a bad place.
And can you tell us some of the key figures, the gods in Norse mythology, like Odin, Loki, Thor, Freya, and Tyr? Is it Tyr?
Tyr. Yep, Tyr. Yep, Odin is probably the most well known. He's sort of the king of the gods, the head of the pantheon. Has one eye, as a lot of people are kind of familiar with that image of him. The way that Norse belief works, the thought was that the world, our existence, is cyclical. So everything goes in a cycle. And at some point, there was going to be this event called Ragnarok, where the gods were going to get into this huge battle with the giants. And the giants are sort of these forces of entropy and chaos in a lot of cases. And when that happened, the worlds were all going to get kind of destroyed, and a lot of the gods and a lot of the giants and all of these powers were going to get killed, and then everything would start over again, because that's how things work. So I say that because it's kind of important to understand that Odin, a lot of his stories and a lot of his purpose is about keeping that from happening for as long as possible.
Right.
So his whole thing is about gaining knowledge, gaining wisdom, and doing what he can to delay that as much as possible. Thor is another one a lot of people are familiar with. He's a son of Odin. He is sort of like the protector and guardian of mankind. So he is the one who sort of fights the giants and keeps them away from this world, protects humanity, protects humans, also protects the gods in a lot of cases. He has a hammer called Mjolnir, which is like this super powerful magical weapon. And he is also associated with like fertility of the crops. So even though Odin's sort of the more popular, well-known one, Odin was more the god of like the nobility and poets, and the elite warriors, whereas Thor was sort of the god of everybody. Everybody liked Thor. He was the one that was the most popular, actually, with the pagan Norse. And then you have Freya, as another one people are usually familiar with. She's actually one of the Vanir gods. The way Norse belief says things happen, there was a big war between the Aesir and Vanir at the beginning of the creation. And when it was settled, they exchanged peace hostages. And so a couple of the Aesir went to live with the Vanir, and a couple of Vanir came to live with the Aesir. And Freya was one of the ones who came with her father and brother. And she is sort of this really powerful, everyone loves Freya kind of goddess. She also half battle dead. She's got that action. She's connected to sex and love. Everyone always loves those things.
Yeah, I suppose.
Magic. Yeah, and it's kind of necessary to keep things going. So yeah, she was really really well loved, as well as her brother Freyr. Odin, Thor, and Freyr were the main ones that were found statues of them in the pagan temples of the time. They were like the main three.
And Loki, would he be associated?
Loki is a really fascinating figure. So Loki was the son of giants, which is not unusual, actually. A lot of the Norse gods, even though we call them the Aesir, there's a lot of interesting things going on with that. Thor's mother is a giant, for example. Not all giants are necessarily bad. They just are kind of chaotic. So Loki is the son of two giants. He is a blood brother of Odin. They're kind of, I guess in modern terms, we would say like best friends. But he is a trickster. So a lot of what he does in the stories is sort of show up, start a problem, but then also fix the problem.
Yeah.
And that's
like a
that's
builder,
sort of
really.
Yeah.
A cowboy
Yeah,
builder. Sorry, my joke.
no, he's an interesting one because a lot of people, in modern terms, don't like him because he is associated with sort of in the end of all the Norse stories. He kind of turns against the Aesir and sides with the giants. But there's a lot that went on that led up to that. But in the bulk of the stories, he travels a lot with Thor. He's sort of a good friend to Thor and helps him with a lot of things. He also is the one who gets the gods most of their treasures. So, like Mjolnir is something that happened because of Loki. Now, usually the way these stories go, it's not a straightforward like Loki does a random act of kindness sort of deal. It's more like Loki causes a problem, and then to fix it, does something that actually then benefits everyone. So the way that Thor gets his hammer is Loki actually shaves the head of Thor's wife, Sif, which in context that was like very shameful. It was, and there's some implications as to why that happened, but very shameful. So she gets very upset. Thor gets very upset, and Loki's like, "Well, I'll fix this." And instead of waiting for the hair to grow, he goes to the dwarves and gets them to make her this like golden hair that's beautiful and everyone loves it. But to make up for the fact that everyone's mad at him for doing this to begin with, he also gets the dwarves into this competition, these two groups with each other. And he gets the golden hair, he gets Mjolnir, Thor's magic hammer, he gets a magical spear for Odin, he gets this golden boar pig for Freyr that Freyr can ride on, but was made by dwarves. Gets a magical boat, like all these things, and kind of comes back to the gods and is like, "Here are all your magical treasures."
It's like a mini Raffle one now on somebody else's money there.
Kind of. And there's more to the story than just that. I'm giving the quick version, but that's kind of who Loki is. He's helpful, but his helpfulness is always interesting.
There's always someone in the family like that. I was just going to say that, and it's Tia. It's Tia's. Is that how you spell it? Tyr.
Tia. Yep.
Is the god of, is that war or?
Yep, he's associated with war. He's associated with justice. He was seen as like the upholder of the law. He's missing a hand because there's a whole story to do with this delaying Ragnarok. One of Loki's children is this monstrous wolf, and originally it's being raised in Asgard with the gods. But there's this prophecy that eventually the wolf is going to basically become so gigantic and so dangerous that it will kill Odin. And Odin, of course, is not a fan of this, but they can't kill the wolf. So they decide they're going to try to bind it. And the wolf, of course, it looks like a wolf, but it's a giant, so it's intelligent. And it's not on board with this, let's tie me up for eternity plan. So the only way they can finally get it to agree, because they trick it by saying, well, you're so strong, nothing's going to hold you. We just want to test that. And we'll let you go, if we find something you can't break out of. Is he'll only agree if Tyr, who is the god who had particularly been close to him and had been feeding him, would put his hand in his mouth. And the wolf basically, is in a position where if the gods don't let him go, he's going to bite the hand off. And Tyr knows that, but he does it anyway, because this is something that's seen as necessary to prevent the end of this cycle of the world. And that's what happens. And then he loses his hand from that.
And it's interesting because we were in a castle in County Galway there, and we were asking, there was some Viking peasants coming through, And the reason why we got to know we never knew about this Norse god or key figure, and it spelled out the words TYR, you know, on the board, on the talking board. We asked us a question, who do you worship, and went to TYR, and it's
interesting.
yeah, and then we never knew that, and we only found out afterwards. Then we looked up the books and Norse mythology or Vikings, and just looked up what TYR stands for on Google search or something like that, and it was Norse god. Like, you know, it's fascinating there.
Yep.
You know, so
yeah,
like
he was just.
So go on, sis.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
I
go
could
on, sis.
go on forever about this. No, I was just gonna say he's not as well known today. He's a little more obscure, and he wasn't as big in the old temples as the other three that I mentioned. But like anytime there was a law assembly or anything like that going on, he was always the one that was invoked. Like he was seen as being very important, and they have found a lot of swords that were engraved with his name. So that's fascinating that you had that particular thing come up. Definitely associated with warriors. Yeah.
He was a kind of a spirit that was coming. It was like a Viking spirit, like a soldier, like he was coming through. So can you tell us, like, now with Marvel has incorporated, you know, obviously with Norse mythology before and all that, the franchises there. Is this a great or major concern? Is it got more people interested in it, in Norse mythology? Or,
you know, I think it's one of those things that it's a bit of a double-edged blade, if I could have a little Viking pun here. Because on the one hand, it definitely gets a lot more attention to the Norse gods and sort of revives interest in that. On the other hand, though, definitely the Marvel material is not the most accurate, you know, and it's not meant to be. It's based on comic books that were written, you know, in like the 60s and 70s that were meant to be entertaining. You know, it's not supposed to be retelling mythology. And, you know, so we see things like, you know, Loki is Thor's brother and like the adopted son of Odin, which is not anything at all like what we have in the mythology. It definitely puts a different twist on things. Hela being a sister of Thor and Loki is another thing. Like in actual mythology, Hela is one of Loki's children. And she's the one who's in charge of Helheim and where all the human dead go. And she's not a warrior or dangerous. It's an excellent movie. I'm not criticizing the movie. It's very entertaining. But yeah, it's definitely a different kind of a thing. But it does get people interested. So
yeah, you know. It's something that I was interested in, you know, Marvel before the big films came out anyway there. But, you know, it's I suppose it does shed a bit more light on a little bit of things, but as you said, it's a double-ended sword. Like, you know, it could go either way. You know, people misled by what actually happened. I just put probably another question there. What was the Norse mythology? I'll come to Anthony's response there. Like, what was the ideology behind the afterlife in Norse mythology? Like, did they? How did they celebrate death? I know you mentioned hell as a place where the people went to afterwards.
Yep. It's really fascinating if you get into it, because the thought was that humans, the soul had multiple parts to it. So you could die and then have a couple different things happen at the same time, basically. Certainly going to Helheim was where most people were kind of expected to go. People who had a strong connection to a particular deity would be thought in many cases to go to the hall of that god. So, you know, Odin, it's Valhalla, Freya, it's Folkvanger. You know, they each kind of had their own special place in Asgard, and it was possible for human souls to also end up there. We also see ideas, though, with the concept of the human soul kind of becoming a protective spirit. And there's particular terms for this. In the Norse, the female spirit would be the Disir. Dis is the singular. And that would always be maternal spirits, female spirits that would kind of keep watching over their descendants And then the male spirits would sometimes go into the mounds, the burial mounds, but continue acting as guardians, the mound dead. And then, of course, you have ones that went in with the Alfar and became elves, and like you had a lot of options.
It's very cool. I love it there. The different types of what's it called? What's the boat again? Is that still celebrated where the body's put on the boat?
The burning of the boat, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm honestly not sure if there's a specific name for it, but it's a type of funeral. They would also do funeral pyres on land in some cases. But yeah, I think everyone remembers the burning of the boat idea. And yeah, the idea of cremation was certainly a big thing.
Anthony says, we all have our formed beliefs and ways. If two parents are telling different stories when there's a breakup, you listen to both sides and form an understanding of true events. The same should be done with myths and religions in order to find the truth or the labyrinth of real truth. I suppose it's society as well, than what society says as well, And Anthony mentions the fairy man. I think that's Karen, isn't it? But I think that's Roman. That's Roman.
Yeah, Roman or Greek.
Yeah, Roman and Greek. Yeah. But I think they're celebrating Celtic mythology as well, the fairy man. And as well, recently, been doing some stuff about it there. It's about, it was put under the lip, wasn't it? The coin or on the eyes?
Yep. I think you see both in different contexts. The eyes are the more well-known, but I think there's also one where they put it in the mouth.
Yeah.
The idea you have to pay your fee. True story with the Norse. The reason
it'd
that
be swipe card now these days, would it?
It would be. You'd have to have like a speed pass. Norse sailors would always carry something gold on them, and it's thought that that's part of why sailors would wear gold jewelry, because there was a particular goddess, Ran, and it was thought if you drowned at sea, you had to have something to pay her with, or she would keep you.
Okay.
So, yeah, fun fact, since we got on the subject of gold coins.
Yeah, gold and silver and the fairy man. It's cool. I love all this stuff there. So we're going to touch about fairies now shortly there. But first of all, there, if you're there still, Mary from back in time there, you're in the Tower of London, and with Morrigan, you've got 4 choices to find out where Anne Boleyn's signature is. So you've got the choice of the statue, bank, the £5 banknote, wooden bench, or ravens or stroke crows there. So you have statue, banknote, wooden bench, or ravens. If you just select one of those there, Mary. Morrigan, which one would you like to go for?
I'll let Mary go first.
All right. Because you get the same one, at least you can change it there. Mary's gone for ravens. I bet you were going to pick that as well, weren't you, there, Morrigan?
I might have. It's hard not to love ravens.
No. Which one would you like? You got 50% chance now. There's 2 that are right and there's 2 that are wrong. So,
I'll go with the statue.
Statue. Okay, statue. Okay. And she's gone back in Troy. Achilles allows his fallen to put the coins on the eyes and receive the passing.
Yep.
Yeah, it's true there. That's where I've seen it. And I think it was in old Celtic beliefs as well. They still did it, and there's some graves found with the coins as well, found in bodies as well. Graves as well. I know my dad's own passing. He had cans of beer and betting shop slips. I don't know things that he used to give there. Like he needed some money, obviously, for the betting, the bingo, and all that. And you
got to be prepared.
So you got to be prepared. When the ravens leave the tower, isn't there a prophecy in England? Yes, I think it's to do with the kingdom falls down there.
Yeah, I heard that's why they clip their wings.
Oh, is that true?
Kind of, yeah. Sort of like Odin trying to prevent the end of the world. That they clip the wings of the ravens at the tower, and so they leave.
Yeah, I've seen you probably do it with food. I've seen them as well. They'd be trained. I've seen the program about them, and they're trained, and I think they're very specially trained there. I think there's they've been told they know how to come back since they were chicks and all that. So there's people that actually train them before they go into the tower there, you know. And she says, Hugin and he's the other half. Oh, Hugin, is it?
Yep. Hugin and Munin. Yep. In memory, the ravens of Odin. Yeah, he sends them out every day into the world to gather intel.
So I'm going to talk about fairies now, folks. So this is another different subject now, completely different, but it's great to talk about it there because it's great, you know, it's all linked sort of together there. Can you explain, and this is going to be probably a broad question there, you know, Morgan, like everything else tonight there, what is a fairy?
Yeah, hit me with the easy ones.
Hit you with the easy ones.
Excellent. Very simple question.
Like N&M.
Yeah, so
hit me with it straight. Tell me everything.
Yep. So when we're using the word fairy in English, obviously we're generally talking about things that would have different names. Like in Ireland, we'd be talking about the she, the Aishi, the Sheoga. In Scotland, it would also be the she, just spelled differently. Itoateg in Wales, and etc. But we call them all fairies in English. And a lot of people sort of have this idea that it's the sort of popularized tiny little sprites with wings, which I'm sure are out there somewhere. But really, when we're talking about fairies, we're talking about any being that is from Ansil Ella, any being that's from the other world, which is a world that is adjacent to and sort of superimposed upon the human world, but is a separate place. It's where the Tuatha Dé Danann went after humans came to Ireland, according to the mythology. They went into the She and became, or joined, I should say, the Aishi, the people of the fairy hills. And so there's a huge variety of what these beings are. You have Catshi, fairy cats, Kushi, fairy hounds. You have things like the Echosi, the fairy water horses, I should say, water horses. You have beings that look very much like humans, but are not. You have beings that do not look at all like humans, you know, that can be very dangerous. Any of them can be very dangerous, to be clear. So it's this huge range. The puka, I know the puka was in the news quite a bit recently because of the statue that ended up getting put out in the Burren. Really glad it found a home finally. Puka is this shape-shifting spirit, often considered to be a type of fairy that can take the form of a human. It can take the form of a goat, a dog, a bat, an eagle, a horse. It's a wide range. So yeah, there's a lot going on. If we're going to talk about, you know, what are fairies, they are all of that, and they can definitely have effects on humans, positive or negative.
I'm going to probably,
and I should also say it's generally thought to be bad luck to call them fairies, but I live dangerously and do it all the time. So
yeah, and obviously even the word fairies, how it's worded as well, fairy, and it's spelled in different many ways. So it's different there. I was going to say, I suppose I'll touch on the more serious stuff in a minute about fairies there, but is there any method, any way of communicating with them? Do you know how do people usually communicate with fairies?
Sure. For the most part, you can just talk to them. It's actually a very, very old folk belief, and obviously still believed today, that you need to be careful what you say about them out loud because they can hear you. They're capable of passing invisibly, so they can be around and you won't know they're there. And if you say something that offends them, particularly things like "I don't believe in this," you know, or they're nonsense, that they tend to react poorly. And then usually something happens to the human that was being disrespectful or rude. So there's sort of a long-standing idea that if you want to communicate with them, you just have to speak out loud, particularly in places that are associated with them, which in Ireland is almost everywhere. A lot of places have those connections or associations.
I know Anthony just mentioned about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I'm going to talk about something like the Cottonley in a second there.
Oh yeah, we could definitely talk about the Cottonley fairies. That's
definitely an
that's a whole
interesting
thing.
subject there. That's a whole show itself, really, there, but we'll touch upon it shortly.
Honestly, it is.
But
It definitely could be.
But I was saying like the psychological and physiological defects in people in the past is a sort of serious question there has been linked to fairies there, you know. For example, the changeling. Is this justified?
So the changeling belief it's very complex. When we look at what actually happened in the past, the idea was that the fairies, the good folk, would steal humans. And this could be any humans, babies, children, adults. We have a whole range of stories. And because of this, there were all sorts of different methods to try to get the human back. And some of them are sort of heroic and romantic. You go to the Roth or the Lish, the fairy hill, the She at under the full moon, and you pull the person down off the fairy horse and you save them, and yay. But a lot of them are fairly horrific, and sort of involve torturing the person with the idea that it wasn't a human, it was a fairy, then they would leave, or the other fairies would take them back and release the real human. So what we find, particularly across the 19th century, is all these accounts of people, particularly children, who had an illness or a birth defect or something along those lines, and ended up, just to be blunt, being murdered by their family or by these specialists that the family would bring in because they were thought to be changelings. The most famous case, of course, is Brigid Cleary. She's said to be the last changeling killed in Ireland. That was in the 1890s, 1896, I believe. She was a 26-year-old woman. She fell ill. I believe it was bronchitis, but it sounds like it was probably pneumonia towards the end. Her husband came to believe she was a changeling. He and quite a few members of her family ended up trying all of these cures, which I won't get into, in here, because they are not something really that people are going to want to hear about. But she eventually died. And then the authorities found out about it, and they were put on trial for murder, and they were convicted. It was in a lot of the newspapers at the time. But there are other accounts as well. At the same time of there was a 6-year-old boy who had smallpox and never quite recovered, and was eventually thought to be a changeling because he was sickly. And he also was murdered. There was a case of a girl who, in infancy, had what seems to be, from the description, some kind of stroke, cerebral hemorrhage, and was never recovered from that. And I think she was 4 when she was killed. So, it's sort of a very grim kind of thing to look into. The history of it. Whether it was justified, I think, gets into a very complicated discussion. The people doing it genuinely believed. Michael Cleary, he killed his wife. He went out and waited on the Fairy Hill 3 nights in a row because he truly thought that his real wife was going to reappear, which obviously was not the case. So these are people whose belief led them to do horrific things.
Yeah, there's a case not too far away from us that did happen as well. There was a child drowned in the waters there in River Flesk in Killarney.
Yep, he was paralyzed. Yep.
Yeah,
I've actually read about that one. Yeah.
Just a few comments before we touch on, because there's more stuff there. I suppose we're just talking about cotton. I'll come to that now in a second.
Conan Doyle.
Cotton, you smell it better than me. So yeah, like fairies are linked to suicide. I suppose for suicide, whether it be used as a cover up for suicide, intoxication, hallucinations, accidental death, and sadly murders as well. Would that be the use of fairies as well?
Yeah, I think that there's always this sort of gray area between what is sort of genuinely inexplicable, we might call paranormal, supernatural, if you truly believe in the fairies and folk. Because I've certainly heard stories that I couldn't give any other explanation for, except that there is something that is there of that nature. And then you have, where that belief is being used as an excuse to justify things that are definitely very human in nature. So
it's like the big
sometimes
wind.
it's
The big wind in, I think it was 1840s, something like that, in Ireland, associated with the weather, fairies as well. They thought it was the fairies causing the weather to big wind.
Yeah, the shiguiha, the fairy wind. Yeah.
And so
it's kind of fascinating, that gray area.
And so I don't know how you spell it now. We've got to touch on it there now, Anthony. The Cottonlee fairies. Can you tell us about that there?
Sure. So the Cottingley fairies, and this is another of these historic things that a lot of people have very strong opinions on. It basically was these two younger girls. One was a teenager and one was a little younger than that, in England, who produced these photographs, supposedly of the girls interacting with these fairies, sort of the stereotypical little winged, sprite kind of a fairy. And at the time, it really took everyone by storm. A lot of people believed the photos were real. This was back when photography was very different than it is today. There were no digital cameras. There was no, actually, I think today we're getting back right into it. Yeah, I have to correct myself. Like, I think today we're actually getting back into with CGI and special effects, where we might be like circling right back around to where they were in the early 20th century. But a lot of people thought the pictures were real. They could not be proven as fakes in the way that people would normally fake things like in spirit photography, which was a known fraud that could happen. And so it caused this huge controversy. Some people did not believe in it. The spiritualists in particular kind of jumped in to support it. Arthur Conan Doyle was a spiritualist, and very quickly kind of vocally supported. He wrote and published these things commenting about the photos and that they were real and that this was proof that fairies were real, and kind of staked his reputation a bit on it. Provided equipment for the girls to take more photos, to sort of prove that they weren't messing with the photography plates, because that was how it was normally done if you were faking things, and they weren't. And it remained this huge controversy for, I want to say it was something like 60 years. And then one of the girls, when she was in her 80s, confessed that they had faked the pictures, that they had used cutouts, that they had drawn the fairies, traced them, and then cut them out and propped them up. Which is why they couldn't be proven to be fake photographs, because the photographs were legitimate. It was the image that was a problem. She did swear, though, even to her deathbed, that one of the photos was real. That there was one of her, I believe it was her cousin, with one of the fairies, that was a genuine photo, but that they could never reproduce it, and they felt so pressured that they created this fake. The other woman, I believe, never publicly retracted the original story that they were real photographs. So to this day, there are people who feel very strongly about the Cottingley photos. There was a huge exhibit recently, because we're just past the 100-year anniversary of the whole thing going early 20th century viral. And yeah, it's really interesting to see the way that people kind of chose one side or the other very strongly.
Yeah,
And a
so it
lot of
was,
people, when the truth came out, like Conan Doyle's reputation took a hard hit.
yeah. It's like well, he's so much friends with what's the magician's name? And then again, oh, what's his name? It's completely gone out of my head.
Well, there's so many to choose
Obviously,
from. Crowley, maybe?
the magician. What's people will probably be saying no in a minute. I can't find it. I was just looking on my
Houdini?
notes. Houdini, yes, great friends with Houdini, and he fell out after this. There, like you know, they never really. But there was other stuff there, but they really fell out after this kind of the fairy sightings here.
Yeah, because he was very adamant that it was real and that he believed in it, and there were many people that did not agree.
I've got a few more questions there. Mary says, from back in time, my father always had respect for fairies. There was a fairy ring on the land. It was left alone and never touched. They would cut the crops around it. So probably leaving where the fairy ring is.
Yeah. No, and to this day, there's a lot of people. Unfortunately, there are some people who are not that respectful, and I say unfortunately not for the fairy belief, but that a lot of the Roth and the lists are actually archaeological sites. We know now, but so it's sad to see them being destroyed. But yeah, there are people still today that won't, and I still hear stories from friends of bad things that happen to people that damage a fairy tree or one of the fairy hills.
Yes, and she says the banshee and my family are interwoven. She would send signs of loved ones passing to others. It would put the fear of God into you, and you wouldn't come across it before. But to us, it's a friendly omen.
Yeah, the banshee really gets a bad reputation these days, undeserved. There are certainly stories of her being dangerous, particularly to people that are disrespectful or foolish, but she mostly would show up just to warn a family that a passing was going to happen. So she wasn't causing the death. She was just warning them that it was going to occur.
Anthony says, would you say the two cherubim on the ark are fairy-like?
I mean, to a degree. It's interesting because there's a lot of crossover with fairy belief and angels. When Christianity came in, and you have these fairy beliefs, the way that Christianity sort of fit fairies into that was to make them this class of being that's they're not good enough to be angels in heaven, but they're not bad enough to be demons in hell. They're sort of in the middle. So they are sometimes described as a type of fallen angel that's not a demon, or a type of demon that's not really that bad. That middle ground.
And I suppose we're just going back to a couple more questions there. Like so, thanks to Peter Pan and Cinderella, Lord of the Rings, have fairies becoming more popular in this day and age? So are they shaking off what they like you said, the 19th century kind of world, and have they kind of more people want to get involved more with fairies?
Yeah, I definitely think, particularly the last 20 years, I'm going to make myself sound so old when I say some of this, particularly in the last 20 years, there's been a real upsurge in interest, and also in a change from, when we talk about like the 1980s or the 1990s, fairies were still very much understood to just be that little winged sprite, kind of helpful, kind of helpless, very Disney Tinkerbell in a lot of ways, but nicer. And what we've seen in the last 20 years, really into the 21st century, is taking them back into being more dangerous, more human-like in appearance, more of that variety in what they are, and definitely more of an idea that you need to respect them or they're going to remind you why You need to respect them.
True. And like as we touched upon, I suppose there's elementals as well. So I'm just going to see what is the difference between a fairy and an elemental.
So that's an interesting question. If you had asked me that 30 years ago, I would have said they're completely different things, because an elemental is the embodiment of a particular element, which is sort of how it was seen back in the day, as it were. However, what I've noticed is that the last 5, maybe 10 years, people are sort of using elemental as a term for fairies. When they want to be clear, they're not talking about the little Tinkerbell kind of fairy. So when they're talking about the ones that are more primal and more dangerous and more likely to smack you in the head if you're rude to them, you know, the ones like if you're a paranormal investigator that you might run into that's clearly not a ghost or a shadow person or anything else, what I would call a fairy, looking at that evidence, it's going to get labeled an elemental. So it's sort of this changing term, I think.
Yeah, so it's like in the borderline of being and like bad, instead of being, you know, like a fairy. It's just below the fairy mark, and you know, it's just at 12. You could say it's at 12 instead of being at 12 like a fairy. Like,
yep. It's definitely right in that range, that lower range.
Yeah. Because I was thinking, because like anthropomorphism, like as in people not more used to a fairy than the word fairy than an elemental, that they would actually think more of a fairy and be more conscious of a fairy than an elemental. So that would mean that fairies are more expected than elementals. And seen, I suppose, would fairies be like, would they stick more, have freedom to move around, and elementals be stuck to one location?
Yeah, if we're going with sort of the older view, elementals would be very not location specific, the way that you might be thinking like within a large area, but like extremely like this one fireplace or that one rock, or you know, they're very contained in one particular location, and very contained to one particular element. So if you have an elemental that's like a water elemental in a pool and the pool dries up, the elemental is not there anymore. You know, that's just sort of the nature of what they are. Whereas fairies are definitely more fluid with their movements. They can move. They're often connected to locations, but they're not bound to those places for the most part. Obviously, I say that I'm thinking of a bunch of stories where that I'm contradicting myself, but for the most part, you know, we have a lot of stories of fairies, like the Sluishi, the fairy host, sweeping someone up who's walking on the road and taking them to France, you know, for the entertainment value of dumping them in France, apparently.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
You might get your luggage back then as well.
Yeah. Surprise holiday, you know. Yeah, so, but that shows that they can move around. You know, there's a story of one family. The girl was talking about how this was from the late 19th century. Her mother had a friend among the fairies, this fairy woman who would come sometimes and talk with her, give her information. And she showed up once and told her that the brother who had emigrated had died. And they got a letter a week later confirming that had actually happened. And the implication was that the fairy woman was able to travel, to go, and had been there. Was the way she'd related it to the woman. So they can definitely be where they want to be, as opposed to elementals.
That's interesting. Just a few more statements there. Anthony says, yeah, Houdini, bless him. Sorry, no, I've lost that there. Houdini, bless him, didn't want people to be fooled by parasites. Yeah, you see there's work both ways there, you know, with people who are a bit of who
did a lot, I think, to debunk fraud and to like show people how certain things were done. that people thought were like miraculous at the time. Houdini was like the original Mythbuster, going in and doing that, if I remember correctly.
It was a seance they did. What was it up to? I think it's still going now. A seance they do every certain day of the year to see if Houdini's ghost appears. It was supposed to have happened to his wife. He said it to his wife to do a seance to see if I appear every year on this date, and I think he never did appear to her there. Like, you know, but that's Houdini. He probably wouldn't. Would you go? All right.
Yeah, I was just gonna say he probably did it on purpose. Yeah. And was standing there like,
no, I got. I would be the same there. Like, Cullen and Tuffer Dinan are more magical than any human can understand. Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's kind of their nature. Yeah.
I spelled
no
that,
pun intended. After we were just talking about elementals, but you know, they are beings that are from a different reality, if we want to put it that way, that interact with the human world, but you know, they definitely are beyond humans in some sense.
Just as was mentioned, that sounds there, Anthony there, and he's just asks there, do you think there were fairies in the hills of Tara?
Yeah, around that area. There's a couple locations. There, I believe it actually came down in the last year or two because people were tying so much onto it. The tree actually collapsed, which is very sad. Yeah. But there's different folklore and stories around that location. Not as much as you find in some other places, because Tara has a lot going on with it, as everyone I'm sure is aware, particularly with the mythology. But there's definitely some fairy folklore going on as well.
Okay, so I'll come back to you now in a second, Morgan, and just to say what you're up to there. Now people can contact you, but first of all, it's competition, and we're going to see if Mary and yourself are right there, Morgan. So this is one of the right answers. I'm just going to mute ourselves there and see what it is. I think, which one was that? I didn't see it there. I don't know which one that one was. There's one of them anyway.
That was the Ravens.
That was the Ravens.
That was the Ravens.
So Mary, you're in there.
Yeah, that was the Ravens.
You're in the Halloween
so,
mega
yay,
draw.
Mary.
And this is the next one. So this was the next correct answer. Here it goes. Let's hopefully it's statue. And I think that was, I don't know if anyone saw that there. I mean, internet's a bit slow today. It could be still the warm weather. I think it was the £5 note. So
Yep.
Anne Boleyn there, she made a mark.
That's okay.
She likes money and crows. Fair dues to her.
You can't blame her.
You can't blame her.
You can't blame
I'm sorry
her.
there, Morgan. Mary known from back in time, you're into the Halloween mega draw. So I'm sorry, unfortunately, there, Morgan. You picked statue there, so unfortunately there. Can you tell us there,
Not
Morgan,
a problem.
where can people find you? What have you got lined up in the next few months?
Sure. So I, of course, social media is inescapable. So on Facebook and Instagram under Morgan Daimler, on Twitter under Morgan McSorley Daimler, because McSorley is the actual last name. Daimler's my ex-husband's last name, and that's the whole thing. But that's the name I write under. So you can mostly find me under Morgan Daimler wherever you are looking for me. I'm not hard to find usually. If anyone has any other questions or anything from this show, feel free to on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever.
Yeah, there's links as well to Morgan's books as well, and you got loads of interesting books there, and you do a blog on YouTube there that's very worth. There's also a link to that as well on our page there, and you got. Are you coming over in October? Is it October, November?
I am. I will be in Dublin in October for Octocon, which is a sci-fi and fantasy convention. Most of what I write is nonfiction, Irish mythology and fairies, but I do write fiction as well, for fun. So I'll be over there for that. I'm really looking forward to it. Obviously, COVID, I have not been over in a couple years, which makes me very sad. So really looking forward to getting back.
It'd be great to see you. I'll bring the luggage over because I'll probably end up in Kerry there if you're going to Dublin. So I'll pop it over to you there. I was going to say, so on the next, that's the plan. I'll bring it back to you. When I'm going over. So on the next show, we have the Temperance Hall investigation review. So this is completely different. So this is an investigation review. So we'll be including footage, history, haunting legend, experiments, equipment, and sessions that were involved in the investigation on the night, along with a conclusion. So that's an investigation we did with GhostÉire. So it'll be a different type of show there. We'll be showing footage of what happened that night there. Mary Kate Barry. Hi, Mary Kate says, yes, over 60 books to check out, some amount of work accomplished there. It's amazing what you've done there, Morgan. There.
Yeah, I like I said, I mostly write about Irish mythology and fairies, a little bit of Norse material in there. I do translations from Old and Middle Irish. I have a couple books of translation material out, and then some fiction. So it's a little bit of everything. It adds up.
So check out that. There's links to Morgan's page on Amazon as well, and also to YouTube as well. Anthony says, mirror, mirror on the wall, who the fairies of them all? That'd be me. Mary says, thanks guys for an interesting show.
Definitely.
Could listen to you for an age, Morgan. Yeah, you're very interesting, Morgan, and it's great because at least
it's such a fun thing to talk about.
It's so much interesting. It was like it's interesting stuff that it's bits of stuff we see on our travels or going around on our daily lives, or as in the paranormal. If you're doing the paranormal investigations, going around to these locations, you might come across spirits from different genres, like Vikings, and you might wonder who do they worship and all that, all Celtic, like the Morrigan there, and fairies and all that there. Irene from down the road from you in California. So, I know you're in Connecticut there, so that's the other part.
I'm actually closer to Dublin than I am to California.
I was going to say that. You're closer
enough.
to me than so, it's a great show. I love to hear about fairies. Thank you, Brian Morgan. No worries. Says give my love to Ray as well. That's about it, folks. And thank you, Morgan. Thank you for coming on this show. It's been a pleasure there. And we'll check in sometime there in the future. It'd be great to have you here personally as well for a convention as well,
Yeah.
And
thank you for having me on. I had a great time.
Thank you there. And thank you to everyone that participated as well tonight there. Kelly says, thank you, guys. Great to listen to you, Morgan. And Brian from Belfast Paranormal Investigation says, great show, folks. And Anthony says, think for would know lots about fairies from Merlin. I know that's a tongue twister for me now, Anthony. There. Have a great evening. Thank you, Anthony. You're a legend there, and thank you for your knowledge and input there as well. Without you guys as well commenting, it wouldn't be as a massive show, and it's great to have everyone's perspectives as well there. Thank you, Morgan. Hope you have a great evening now. Sunday evening.
Thank you for having me on.
And I won't see you next time. I'll see you in the near distance. Bye bye for now, folks. Bye bye.